Russia hit the center of Sumy with ballistics. However, Putin continues to talk about so-named peace and diplomacy.
The negotiations are progressing very well.
I'm Albina Peterniak, and we talk about the current events in Ukraine and the world. Russia carried out about a terrible strike on Sumy with a ballistic missile. It hit right in the city center. As a result, a large number of dead and injured are now known. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky wrote about this in his telegram. As of now, 34 people are known to have been killed in Sumy by the Russian ballistic missile strike. Among those killed were 2 children. My condolences to the families and loved ones. More than 100 people have been wounded, including 10 children. All of them are receiving the necessary assistance. It is crucial that the world doesn't stay silent or indifferent. Russian strikes deserve nothing but condemnation. There must be pressure on Russia to end the war and to guarantee security for people. Without truly strong pressure, without sufficient support for Ukraine, Russia will continue dragging this war out. It's now the second month that Putin has been ignoring the US proposal for a full and unconditional ceasefire. Unfortunately, there in Moscow, they are convinced they can keep killing with impunity. Action is needed to change this situation. The Ukrainian president noted that in Telegram.
A horrific Russian ballistic missile strike on Sumy. Russian missiles hit an ordinary city street, ordinary life, residential buildings, educational institutions, cars on the street. And that's on the day when people go to church. Palm Sunday, the feast of the Lord's entry into Jerusalem. According to preliminary information, dozens of civilians were killed and wounded. Only filthy scum can act like this, taking the lives of ordinary people. My condolences to the families and loved ones. A rescue operation is underway. All necessary services are working at the scene. The world must respond firmly. The United States, Europe, everyone in the world who wants this war and these killings to end. Russia wants exactly this kind of terror and is dragging this war out. Without pressure on Russia, peace is impossible. Talks have never stopped ballistic missiles and aerial bombs. What's needed is an attitude toward Russia that a terrorist deserves. I thank everyone who stands with Ukraine and helps us defend life.
The Russians struck the center of Sumy on Palm Sunday. This was reported in the telegram by the head of the Center for Countering Disinformation, Andrei Kovalenko. He noted that the strike was carried out in the way to internationally cause as many victims as possible. The Sumy City Council reported that Russia attacked the city's civilian infrastructure. In the result of the missile strike in Sumy, there are dead and wounded civilians. There are damaged residential and non-residential buildings. According to the Sumy City Council, they has been deployed the headquarters to eliminate the consequences of the emergency situation.
On Palm Sunday, Russian creatures hit civilians in Sumy with missiles, intentionally so that there would be many victims. And this happened after Witkoff's visit to Moscow to Putin. The previous time there has been hit Kryvyi Rih, when many children died. That was after Dmitriev's visit to Washington, where he also met with Witkoff. All its so-called diplomacy and racket, Russia builds around strikes on civilians.
The head of Ukrainian intelligence, Kirill Budanov, named the unit that carried out the terrorist attack on Sumy. At the head of the main intelligence directorate reported the strike with 2 Iskander-M KN-23 ballistic missiles was carried out by Russian crew of the 112th and 448th missile brigades from the territory of the Voronezh and Kursk regions. Meanwhile, days of mourning are being declared across Ukraine for the victims of Sumy. The mourning days in Lviv will be on April 13 and April 14. All state flags will be lowered in the city. In Konotop, days of mourning have been declared on April 13, 14 and 15. Kit Kellogg reacted to the attack on Sumy. He wrote on his social media that Russia had crossed all the boundaries of decency.
Today's Palm Sunday attack by Russian forces on civilian targets in Sumy crosses any line of decency. There are scores of civilian dead and wounded. As a former military leader, I understand targeting, and this is wrong. It is why President Trump is working hard to end this war.
And the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that there is no room for maneuver for Russia. The occupiers must accept the conditions of the complete and unconditional ceasefire.
I'm appalled at Russia's horrific attacks on civilians in Sumy, and my thoughts are with the victims and their loved ones at this tragic time. President Zelensky has shown his commitment to peace. Putin must now agree to a full and immediate ceasefire without conditions.
Volodymyr Zelensky constantly speaks about the need for our country to receive additional air defense systems. In particular, the Ukrainian leader started this during a speech at a recent meeting in the Ramstein format, and it was the time when the Ukrainian president spoke at the meeting in the Ramstein format that he was in Kryvyi Rih. President Zelensky noted that cities such as Kryvyi Rih are under constant danger, and the most difficult thing to fight is ballistic. Volodymyr Zelensky asked European partners for an additional 10 Patriot systems.
Today, I'm speaking to you from Kryvyi Rih. This city lives under almost constant air alerts because of drones or Russian missiles. The most dangerous threat is ballistic missiles. When there's a ballistic threat, people have just a few minutes to reach shelter. Just imagine what that's like, sending your child outside or just walking through the city knowing that a missile can hit within 5 minutes of launch. It's constant danger. Exactly a week ago, here in this city, in Kryvyi Rih, a Russian ballistic missile killed 19 people, including 9 children, just children, on an ordinary street in Ukraine. We don't have time for metaphors. Our people, our children are under attacks in many cities and villages. Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, Nikoполь, Poltava, Mykolaiv, Zaporizhzhia, Sumy, Kharkiv, Odessa, Chernihiv, and other, many others. They all need protection from Russian missiles. You know that Ukraine has a shortage of air defense systems. You know that Patriot systems can effectively protect against ballistic threats. You also know that we are forced to move the systems we have around the country to give at least temporary protection to different cities. And you know what happens when even one system goes out of service. It means lost lives. In Russia, they see this as their advantage, their ability to be a terrorist state. And we must take away that ability, their belief that killing can be treated lightly. I ask you to focus first of all on air defense for Ukraine. We truly need it. 10 Patriot systems, the free world has them. What is needed now are political decisions to make them work for peace. We need that result.
Volodymyr Zelensky also recalled the prisoners from China who were captured by Ukrainian defense forces on the territory of our country. The Ukrainian leader noted that Putin is trying to drag out the war, and clear evidence of this, among others, is the involvement of foreign citizens in the war on the territory of Ukraine.
Last week, our soldiers captured the first Chinese citizens fighting on the front, fighting for Russia. As of now, we have information that at least several hundred Chinese nationals are fighting as part of Russia's occupation forces. This means Russia is clearly trying to prolong the war, even by using Chinese lives. Putin was not satisfied with soldiers from North Korea. Now he's trying to cover his shortages by pulling in yet another nation, the Chinese. How long can he keep doing this? We must work together to make such questions not about Moscow's choices, but about our joint pressure on Moscow, because that's the only way it will work. And along with supporting our forces and maintaining sanctions against Russia now, we must also think about the future. What will force Russia to choose diplomacy and peace tomorrow? This is our common fate. Europe, the United States, NATO.
Volodymyr Zelensky stressed the importance of ending of Russian-Ukrainian war at the negotiation table, and this requires constant and powerful pressure on Russia. The Ukrainian leader also noted that Russia rejected the ceasefire proposal a month ago and continues to shell Ukrainian territory. That is why the Russian position and Russian demands are only reason why we have not yet reached the stage of reaching peace agreements.
Thank you to all the countries that continue to support Ukraine, our defense, our soldiers, our resilience, stable, predictable, and sufficient defense support, along with joint pressure on Russia and our own resilience here in Ukraine, including our domestic weapons production, and absolutely necessary for this war to finally end. And it must end at the negotiation table. Only the most difficult conditions for Russia on the battlefield and in international relations can force it to do what's needed for a true peace. And today marks exactly 1 month since Russia rejected the US proposal for a full and unconditional ceasefire. 1 month that has made it completely clear Russia is the sole cause of this war. Without strength against Russia, there will be no will in Russia to accept and implement any realistic and effective proposals for peace. I thank everyone who supports this kind of policy, a policy of real results.
Andriy Sybiha noted day before that Ukrainian cares about the security of the whole world. The head of the Ukrainian foreign minister said this during a speech at the Antalya Diplomatic Forum in Turkey. It is extremely important to understand who is victim and who is the aggressor, because a month has passed since Ukraine accepted the terms of a ceasefire.
The Ukrainian army currently has 110 brigades. All these military personnel have combat experience that can seriously strengthen the North Atlantic Alliance. In no way should our country be deprived of the opportunity to join NATO, since this also concerns the security of the alliance itself. Today, Russia has violated a dozen key provisions of the Helsinki Agreement, which was signed by 35 countries in 1755, confirming its respect for human rights, sovereignty, non-use of force, and inviolability of borders. The signing of this agreement was to be an important step towards reducing tensions in the world.
Lavrov also spoke at the Antalya Diplomatic Forum. He noted that the United States understand the need to resolve territorial issues, but as Putin's Myrmidon put it, it is no less important to eliminate the root causes of the conflict.
Repeat again what I said then, and I repeated this publicly also. When we speak about eliminating root causes of any conflict, including Ukrainian conflict, this is the only way to resolve the problem and to establish long-lasting peace. Remove root causes. President Trump was the first and so far, I think, almost the only one among the Western leaders who repeatedly, with conviction, several times stated that it was a huge mistake to pull Ukraine into NATO. And this is one of the root causes which we quoted so many times. They also mention now another thing which related to the root causes, namely territorial issue. They publicly, including Steve Witkoff, they recognize that the territorial issues would have to be handled in the context of the long-lasting settlement. And
this is the Americans.
the Americans.
Donald Trump, on the eve of Witkoff's visit to Moscow, called on Russia to move ahead, and the very next day he gave a rather taut comment from a diplomatic point of view. He noted that it is necessary not to delay agreements, but to make decisions in the end. Relations between Ukraine and Russia may be going well, and you will find out soon enough, said Trump. There comes a point when you just have to put up with it or shut up, and we'll see what comes of it, but I think everything is going well. I'll remind you that this Friday, Trump's special representative Steve Witkoff met with Putin in St. Petersburg. The meeting lasted about 4 hours in total. They supposedly talked about establishing peace. However, according to the information from Reuters, Witkoff didn't achieve any results during these 4 hours of negotiations with Putin. Following the meeting in St. Petersburg, Witkoff informed Trump that the fastest way to achieve peace to give in Putin. In particular, according to the Reuters sources, Witkoff is convinced that the fastest way to achieve peace is to transfer, as he said, ownership of 4 Ukrainian regions to Kremlin. We are talking about Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And let me remind you that Russia demands to get the territories that it couldn't capture by military means. Let me remind you that Witkoff already expressed a similar opinion in an interview with Tucker Carlson on the eve of the meeting in Riyadh. This exact position of Witkoff on Ukraine is supported by the skeptics among Republicans. However, a significant part of the Republican Party is outraged by such proposal of the special representative and believe that the Trump administration has turned too sharply towards Moscow. According to a person familiar with the talks, some Republicans on Capitol Hill were so concerned by Witkoff's clear pro-Russian position in the interview with Carlson that several people called National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Secretary of State Marco Rubio to express their justification. The Reuters wrote about that. At the same time, some American and European officials are convinced that the reason for the situation is that Witkoff has no experience in such negotiations and the Russians are taking advantage of this. Reuters also notes that 2 European officials are recently met with the Trump administration that they were concerned about the pressure on the US government to get results as soon as possible. In their opinion, fast decisions could undermine Ukraine and the security architecture in Europe. European officials also noted that they do not yet see that the Donald Trump administration has a real chance of making peace. Sometimes we hear contradictory statements from different parts of the administration. The European diplomats noted that this also reinforces the feeling that there is no real plan. Witkoff himself left a few days ago. Russia can't calm down about his visit. Russian propagandists, in particular Putin's henchman Rubin, continue to question Peskov about bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. Peskov said that allegedly, despite the statement of the American administration, these relations are developing well. However, he didn't explain the words of Donald Trump, who clearly said that it is necessary to move or shut up. At the same time, Peskov continues the Kremlin's manipulative strategy of delaying negotiations and the war in general, noting that allegedly American-Russian relations were destroyed to zero and now it takes a lot of time to restore them. At the same time, he doesn't say anything about the fact that the main task for the Witkoff was the issue of peace and not Russian-American relations. Because there is a feeling that while America and Russia will establish their diplomatic relations, the question of peace must wait.
In general, there are some extremely contradictory signals now in the American line. From there, we hear that we are dissatisfied with how Russia is allegedly delaying the Ukrainian settlement. then everything seems to be moving very well in relations between Russia and the United States. Where is the truth? How are our relations developing now?
In fact, everything is moving very well. The fact is that resuscitating a relationship almost from scratch is a very difficult matter. Requires very intense diplomatic and other efforts. And the whole path consists of small steps to recreate an atmosphere of at least minimal mutual trust, to strengthen this mutual trust. This is what they are doing now. There are contacts between special services, the Foreign Ministry and the State Department. There are a lot of nuances related to the resumption of the normal activities of our diplomatic missions. And in addition to this, we see that there is a very active and almost regular exchange of visits by special representatives. Both our representative Dmitriev and the American representatives Witkoff are a very good, reliable channel for communicating positions to each other. The presidents listen to these messages, which are transmitted in this way, and have the opportunity to judge the reality of the state of affairs and the real approach, let's say, in the negotiations. All this helps. But, of course, it is impossible to expect any immediate results. The problems were too complex and too neglected. Back then, when the first contacts, say, began with the American administration, there was such a general stir that now, about to lift the sanctions, a meeting of the presidents will take place, almost at the end of February, they promised, even such were the dates. Are we still approaching this meeting of the presidents? In reality, the situation is a little different, it is much more complicated, requires more work, requires more time.
Ситуация чуть-чуть иная, она гораздо более сложная, требует больше работы, требует больше времени.
And now we are walking along this path together very patiently. We still have a lot of steps to take, but we just need to understand how much damage was done to bilateral Russian-American relations under the previous administration. This has very serious consequences, and now it is painstaking work to eliminate these consequences.
At the same time, we see that Peskov is setting up the American administration to continue contacts, as he put it, or rather about trips to the States and Moscow in order to, as Peskov said, establish relations. In particular, Putin's spokesman noted that the arrival of someone could be part of the preparation for Trump's meeting with Putin.
Could this be an additional step towards a meeting between Putin and Trump in person?
One way or another, they will certainly be an additional step towards this meeting. This meeting will take place, and the presidents expressed their political will that it should take place, including doing it publicly. But it will take place at the appropriate time. You need to prepare for it.
But the latest reactions of the White House give hope that Donald Trump himself is beginning to understand Putin's plans. Moreover, the fact that Putin is leading him astray. And the more Trump is led by these Putin manipulations, the more he will drive himself into a dead end, as well as create a danger to the global security architecture. And of course, the issue of a just peace for Ukraine will not stand in this vein. Thank you for watching this video. Please mark it with like if you enjoyed it and leave your comments and thoughts on the events we just discussed.